leaders all over the country. In Ireland, I can see we've got Ireland, we've got people from Germany and probably a few other places as well. I can see Sabine in my corner, actually. Hi, Sabine. Our vision at Uspire is to enable and to provoke the finest commercial leaders in the world. So you are now, if you haven't been with us before on any of our events, you are now officially in our community, so welcome.
I want to Zoom where?
I think somebody might just be on, need to mute, thank you very much. It can be really lonely as a leader. And one of the reasons that we've created the Uspire network of events and our membership as well is to support you. I know it's really, really important that successful leaders seek to grow and continue to develop. We certainly have in the last year. And we focus on two things, awareness and effectiveness. Today we have Lynn Leay here, who is one of our amazing world-class keynote speakers. We also run peer-to-peer problem solving in our network, and our coaching and mentoring supports leaders as they go through their journey, through businesses and through life, actually. And just before I hand over to Colin, who is our chairman, to introduce Lynn, just a bit of housekeeping. The first is please do, if we are to have a network of the finest commercial leaders in the world, then we absolutely need to make sure that you're connected. So please introduce yourself, share emails either separately or on the main chat if you want to. Please do share your tips. And importantly, Lynn's asked us if you would share your questions on the chat as well, which we'll pick up later. But any leadership tips, any thoughts around stress, any reading materials that you've had that add to the richness of today would be really well appreciated. We're going to have a break about halfway, around about 10:20. And we're also going to use some breakout rooms, which we'll explain as we go through. So please do participate in those as well as you can. I think that's me. So I'm going to hand over to Colin now to introduce the amazing Lynn, who...
Hi there, slight technical problem. I think Amanda went on mute just before she could actually finish what she was saying. But hi there, I'm Colin Wright, the chairman of Uspire. Sort of very excited that you've all joined us today. Today we will be hearing from Lynn Leay, just so you put some context on this. She is one of my favourite speakers, and her words and guidance have served me well over about 20 years, I think it is, Lynn. It might even frightfully probably been a bit longer when I first heard you. She's a friend of Uspire and really an excellent example of the quality of our speakers and ambassadors. Without her, I would never have addressed my Be Perfect driver or avoided so many drama triangles. But that's actually another story, perhaps for another time. What we're here to talk about today is obviously stress. And
weird, strangely. Colin, you've muted. How bizarre! That's twice that's happened today with nobody touching any buttons.
Right, sorry, I don't know what people heard then.
No, keep an eye on that.
Address the finest leaders in the world, you were saying.
Oh, right. She addressed my Be Perfect driver or avoided so many drama triangles because Lynn taught me how to steer clear of them. But that is definitely another story. According to the Health and Safety Executive in 2019-20, the rate of self-reported sort of stress-related depression and anxiety was around 828,000 workers. So last year, that would account for around about 17.9 million working days lost. Yeah. But is this the whole story? I think actually not. A majority of people do not report it or even take time off. Remote working and certainly the uncertainty about job security, family well-being, the risk of COVID symptoms will have made all of this significantly worse. In fact, a recent survey suggested that 41% of workers during the lockdown were suffering from mental health issues, Interestingly, but probably not surprisingly, you know, women are 1.5 times more likely to talk about it than men, which surely obviously means that 41% is drastically undercalling it. In fact, McKinsey recently as well, just to give you some stats on this, estimated that $1 trillion of lost productivity globally is caused by stress, poor mental health. I believe that the World Health Authority actually defines strong mental health as something like this, which is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes the potential of their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and be able to make a contribution to their work and community. Would you agree, though, that majority of us regularly suffer some form of minor mental health block during the year? You know, so you think about those days when your biorhythms seem out of synchronization, you know, which can be caused by extra stress at work, some anxiety. Sometimes it's about diet. Maybe you've drunk too much the night before, which we probably can't solve. I think that's solely in your own control, or it can be a lack of sleep. So how many days per year, just put the answer in chat, do you feel less productive, which is lacking that energy or motivation to get things done? Please put the response in chat. And on these days, typically you will be broadly maybe 50% less effective. Yeah. Okay. Getting some interesting responses in, thank you. Yeah. Well, actually the statistic that is reported is around 50 days per year when you are actually at least 50% less productive. That's actually defined as the average. So let me pose another question to you. If we could give you 20 of those days back, yeah, so only 20 of them, yeah, by helping you to cope better with the challenges you face and to manage or prevent some of the symptoms of stress and anxiety, that would give you probably about 80 waking hours per year to use. So let's even suggest that you're going to invest something like 50% of that time back at work. Yeah. So because I'm conscious about your personal well-being, I'm going to suggest that 50% of that time should be dedicated to your balance of life. So I've got a question for you. What would you do with this time? So, you know, I'm going to give you around about 40 hours back. What are you going to do with this time? Here's a few suggestions for you. Well, you could do 12 rounds of golf. Maybe read 8 novels or 30 short stories to your children. See 15 movies or theatre productions. You could do 80 by 30-minute workouts. You could go for 40 3-mile walks with a partner or family. Or maybe even 3 hours voluntary work for charity per week. So because I believe it's important to set yourselves a goal, and if we can give you some time back by helping you manage some of these symptoms, just put in chat how you're going to spend the time you're going to get back. That's great, everybody. It's very important to sort of try and anchor a goal. So if we do manage to actually help you, just think about how you're going to actually spend some of that time. Well, it's over to you, Lynn, because in my opinion, awareness of stress and combating mental health issues sort of delivers on our Uspire mission, which is all about increasing both the leader's personal effectiveness and the effectiveness of others, which is essentially their team and family. So over to you, Lynn. Looking forward to hearing your wisdom.
Thank you. Okay, very nice to meet you, everybody. Colin set the agenda for kind of the session and what we're here to do. And I actually decided we just want to go straight into the material because we've got a short amount of time. And I really want you to think about the options you have to manage stress and how you can support your team to do the same. Because it has been hard times. I think loads of people have coped with it actually really well. But I have been talking to clients and hearing stories which just make me a little bit concerned that there's a backlog. And I think that the more worrying thing for leaders is what it has actually done is made people really take stock about what they want from their lives, which is a great thing. But a lot more people getting pregnant, a lot more people leaving who you didn't expect to leave, because people are just starting to reassess their life. And some of it, I think, is if they have felt really pressured, they're wanting to go to an organisation which takes stress seriously. And they're hoping that, you know, the next company they go to will actually understand it and help them manage it. And if you could actually help them manage it within your own company, I think they're less likely to leave. Now, when we hear the word stress, you know, most of us think of negative things. When I pose that question, you know, I have people saying headaches, anxiety, and all those things come with overstress, and you don't want overstress. It doesn't do you any good at all. But we'd actually have a problem if you didn't have stress itself in your life. Stress is the layman's word for what they medically call the general adaptation syndrome. So hopefully you can see the slides. And the general adaptation syndrome is a set of physiological changes that happen inside our body if we ever feel threatened or we think we're in danger. It's not some airy-fairy thing. And just to get the semantics right, some people talk about stress out here, which technically isn't possible. Stress is happening inside your body, but anything that happens out here that can trigger that response, that is a stressor. So I'll be talking about the need to identify what your stressors are. And this is actually what happens. So the first thing that happens is you tense your muscles, and you don't consciously think I'll tense my muscles. Somebody criticizes you, or you can't find your wallet or your purse, and you think, oh. And the moment you tense your muscles, you shallow breathe. You can't stop that happening. It's physiologically linked. So those two things happen simultaneously. And they send a message to your brain that basically says, start to panic. And then your body does this really clever stuff. So adrenaline is released and your heart actually beats faster. And blood's redirected to your brain, your heart, and your muscles. And cortisol is released, which is a chemical that means your blood would clot more easily if you were actually injured. Hydrochloric acid increases in your stomach and your digestion starts to slow down, and your liver pumps out more glucose to give you energy. I got a bit tired of writing, there's more. Your pupils actually dilate for a moment to take everything in. You sweat a bit more. Now, all of this is happening to prime your body for action. You might have heard of the fight or flight response. Well, stress is the fight or flight response. It's a primeval response. You know, our ancestors used to have to fight off saber-toothed tigers. And you need this because this could save your life. It could already have saved your life. So let's say we imagine that, you know, we're back in the winter when we're leaving the office, if you were in the office, and it's dark and you're so busy thinking about something that's been a bit of a problem at work. You're not paying as much attention as you should as you're walking back across the car park to your car. And you suddenly discover that a car's not seen, you've got dark clothes on and it's about to back over you at high speed. Now, the moment you get any sense you're in danger, you'll go, and it's great that you do that, because as soon as you do that, all this happens, which increases your strength. Not only, you can actually jump further than you could if this didn't happen, and you even process more quickly, which means you're more likely to have worked out whether to go that way or that way to not get dead. So we don't want to stop our body kicking in with the stress response. But what you really have to understand is there's two types of stress. There's desired and there's undesired stress. And yes, sometimes somebody's issue is they get overstressed, and sometimes somebody's biggest problem is they're understressed. And neither of those two positions is a great place to linger for very long. Now, desired stress has two parts to it. It is this response in a true crisis. You know, some of the horrors we had back in 2019, I've got to escape from a burning building. Somebody's going to stab me on Westminster Bridge. I've got to run. Now, what's happening, of course, isn't desired, but your response is desired because it's priming you for action and increasing your chances of survival. But there's another part to desired stress, and I call it challenge stress. It's where you're a bit nervous about something, but you're a bit excited as well. You're going to do something and you're not sure if it's going to work out, but if it does, you'll feel really proud of yourself. Maybe you've got to do a presentation which could be transformational for the business if it's, you know, with a client who could, you know, if they decide to invest in you, you'll be in a totally different ball game. Or maybe you've just got to make a presentation and you're a bit scared to make your presentation. So you've got all this stress response happening, but the difference is you're thinking it probably will go okay and your eyes are shiny. And that's the difference. I know when I've got desired stress, I'm a bit scared, you know, maybe I'm going to talk to a really big audience and I'm a bit scared, but my eyes are shiny because it's also quite exciting. And if you don't have any of this challenge stress in your life, you can become under stress, which I'm going to refer to later. Undesired stress is having the same physical impact on you, but fighting or running away will have no value in this situation. Nor is there any sense that going through this experience could lead to something good. You know, you've just had an email ending a contract from a client and they're a really key client. And it's like, oh, how are we going to manage without this? Or you feel like you've been working really hard and then somebody criticizes you. Or you've just lost your job and you're worrying about paying your mortgage. So when we hear people saying you've got to learn to manage stress, it doesn't mean you've got to get rid of any stress that comes your way. It means you've got to understand that your body has an optimum amount that it can cope with. So I just want to be sure you're on speaker view. If you're not, please put it on just so you can see the flip chart. So I'm going to use this graph to explain this, and I'm going to use myself as an example with the irritating gift of hindsight. Don't you hate hindsight? It's very annoying. And it's just called the stress curve. And it's about realizing that on this axis, this is how many times, and let's say in a month, you unconsciously normally tense your muscles. And every time you tense your muscles, the stress response fires. You know, so the adrenaline, the cortisol, all that kicks in. Now, on this axis is your personal well-being, and that's a combination of physically how well you are, and we'll look at all the signs and symptoms later. You get headaches, things like that, but also emotionally how at peace you feel. Now, if you don't have enough desired stress in your life, you don't have any of this challenge stress, oh, that's not working, sorry, we're here on the curve. You're under stressed. And I realise now that when I chose to stay at home with my oldest child, he's a father himself now, but when he was a baby, I stayed at home for the first 2.5 years and I became under stressed and I was the most miserable I've ever been in my life. Now, I'm not saying that anybody who stays at home with young children is unhappy. We're going to talk about the power of our thoughts, and everything's governed by what you think. And my self-image is based on doing a lot of things to, you know, high standard, the be perfect Colin mentioned earlier on. And I've also got one of the core beliefs about doing things fast and being really busy. It's called hurry up. And I'd wake up on a Tuesday and think, what can we achieve to a really great standard, you know, with a toddler in tow? I don't know. Let's go to the park again. Oh, that'll be thrilling. Wonder if there's anybody in who can have a cup of coffee with. And I feel like I must have been a dreadful mother now. And I wasn't. I was good enough. But I'm not a good stay-at-home mum. And I realised that when my son was about 2, I was unhappy. And I was wondering whether to go back to work. But I know that if I take on a job, I just give it masses of energy. And he was a wakey baby and all that stuff. And I'm just thinking, I don't know about how much energy left in my body. I'm lucky, I got support from my husband. I went back to work and I went straight into my stress optimum. And it's not my imagination. There was an absolute difference in me. Because we'd lived and I'd worked as a medical social worker in America when we were first married. And we came back when I was heavily pregnant, which meant that the people that I was interacting with then, they'd never known me as a working person. And almost everybody in that circle of friends said to me things like, you're so different since you've gone back to work. And I'm going, oh, why? I I don't know really, but you seem very well. I thought, I feel very well. I got this adrenaline rush, the little sparkly eyes. Now, I stayed in my stress optimum for about a year, and I went back, probably the most demanding job I've ever done. I was a social worker for children on that risk register. But I was feeling great because I was feeling valuable and I was living my values. That's another part of managing your stress, you live in your values. But I was part of a very unhappy team of people for reasons I could only analyse 20 years later. And 2 people went off on long-term sick. And I do genuinely believe overstress over a period of time can make you genuinely ill. I was young, idealistic, probably ambitious. I agreed to cover for some aspects of their work, which meant from being in my optimum, because I'm pretty good at managing my time, I started to slide down this line to actually overstress. And I didn't understand all this stuff then. I just knew that when I was pregnant with my daughter, that coping with that particular job and 2 young children would take me over an edge that I just knew was there. And I didn't want to do stay at home and maternity, so I just handed in my notice and set up a business. Now, this is the problem with anybody ever giving you advice, and this is one of the problems with you ever giving advice to other people, particularly in your team, on any personal issue. We advise people from our view of the world, from our coping strategies, from our drivers, which takes no account of theirs. And some people are very graphic in my decision to set up a business when I'm having another baby. And I thought it was wonderful. And I got to be living always, when I was running my own business here right on this edge. I love living on the edge. But the trouble is, if you live on that edge, because you take on a lot of desired stress, which I also even choose to do recreationally, you haven't got much space left for your body to cope if undesired stress comes along to hit you, which we don't normally have control over. So I'm doing really well, and then my mum became ill. She recovered, she's obviously since died, but every time I thought about my mum, that would set off this response. And it coincided with a period when my husband, who'd always loved his work, got a new boss with a very challenging leadership style. And despite me getting him to role play with him about how he could handle some of these difficult situations, his preferred option seemed to be to pack us up and move us to another job on the other side of the country. And I didn't want to move to another side of the country because I just spent 2.5 years building up a local business. What I realised was I've been raised to believe I'm supposed to be perfect at everything. I'm supposed to be perfect at my job, a perfect wife, daughter, next door neighbour, you name it, I've got the belief. And that caused me really issues because whenever I thought about this problem, I was thinking, how can I be a great wife when I don't just say, fine, we'll go wherever you want to go? And I knew I was getting overstressed, but I didn't know how much. And that's one of the real problems with overstress. There's a defense mechanism called denial. And denial basically means you have a quick look at the problem. You think, is there a solution? Well, I can't see one. Oh, well, stop bothering me then. And you actually just don't bring into awareness that you're actually struggling. And other people notice much faster than we notice ourselves that we're actually overstressed. And your job as a leader is to notice much faster that people in your team are getting overstressed and bring it into awareness. I'm going to share a model with you about how to do that later. But first, what I want to do is I want us to have a quick chat with some of the other delegates, and I'm hoping you'll make yourself a bit vulnerable. All of us have gone through stress at some point in our life, and we have certain signs and symptoms which we tend to have. Some people get headaches, some people grind their teeth in the sleep, you know. And if the trouble is, we then look for those same signs in other people. But for reasons I don't understand, I've really tried to work this out and I haven't been able to suss it. But some people get these, but they never get those signs. And the other people get those and they never get these. So in this Zoom room group, just share what you think happens to you when you're overstressed And there are physical changes, there are behavioural changes, and there are emotional changes. And the point of this 10 minutes exercise is for you to have a bit of time to think about, well, what are my signs? But to hear about other people's as well. Because as a leader, you've got to know what every possible sign and symptom of overstress is if you're going to be able to spot it and challenge your people to work out how they're going to get back to their optimum. When you come back, I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of every sign and symptom of overstress that I've ever come across. But for now, I just would like you to have a chat. So can I hand over to you, Chester? And if you
We're ready to go, Lynn. So I'm going to open these rooms up now. We're back, everybody. Everybody should be back in the room for you, Lynn.
Fantastic. Right. Well, if the audience was smaller, we'd have some chat between us, but I'm actually just going to share with you now all the most common signs of stress that I've come across. And as we're going through them, you just sort of let me know. Sorry, you just make a note of which ones apply to you and which don't really, so that you need to be aware of it. Now, some people can't get to sleep. Some people go out like a light, they wake up 4 o'clock in the morning. Some people drift in and out of sleep, but you feel really tired. And a few people actually sleep more. Now that's confusing because it's also a sign of under stress. But in a few people, they sleep more, but they still feel tired. Now you're more likely to catch coughs, colds and flu because the immune system weakens if the stress response is firing. And it doesn't mean that, you know, obviously if you get COVID or you get flu, that you're overstressed, but it increases the chances you'll get them. Digestive problems because of all this acid tipping into your stomach. And they used to believe that ulcers were stress related, but the present medical thinking is they're created by bacteria. However, if you've got an ulcer and you get overstressed, it'll definitely hurt you more. And this is muscle tension, this is a very common place for people to hold tension. But one sign in isolation isn't a sign somebody's overstressed, because that could be somebody's posture. You know, they're on Zoom all day. And even sometimes people tense a different muscle group. And I discovered that I was actually holding most of my tension in my legs. And I didn't understand. I kept thinking, why am I doing that? And I now realize it was to do with my thoughts. When I was in a difficult situation, I work as a mediator and things, and I was a little bit tense myself. I had in my head, it's really important that the learning facilitator appears calm. And I was great at doing that from the waist up. But if I was anxious, I didn't realize the habit was to just tense my legs a little. Headache, because you tense your facial muscles. If you're prone to migraine, you're much more likely to get your migraine when you're overstressed. Skin rashes is because you sweat more. And if you're prone to eczema or something like that, you've got a higher chance it will flare. Now, blurred vision is sometimes because we drink too much. But it is actually because your pupils dilate. And that's fine if it's just for a moment. You're driving down the motorway, is that an accident up ahead? But if your pupils keep dilating, you can begin to have difficulty focusing. And it's rational. Somebody could have a vision problem only in the situation they find stressful. And when I used to work with children, I always remember one little girl who she'd had 3 eye checks and she always got A1 vision, but she kept saying she couldn't see in the classroom. And people said, oh, is she telling lies? Is she seeking attention? And I just went to observe quite a few times. And I think it was the relationship she had with the teacher. If we don't like somebody, we know it. She knew the teacher didn't like her. And whenever she was in her presence, she'd get really anxious. And that was actually affecting her vision. Less control of your fine motor movements. If you're musically or athletically gifted, your performance will deteriorate. And that's when people can get into terrible cycles down. You know, and again, I'll refer to children because, you know, it's important you're aware what's happening in your own family as well if you have children. But maybe this child wasn't fabulous academically, but they always made the school football team. And then because of the stress response keep firing, the coach says, could you just be a reserve for this game? And their self-image was being kept alive by, I'm okay if I'm excellent at football. And then they get more stressed because they feel they can no longer meet this condition they've got for themselves in life. And then they start chasing the tail. High blood pressure, there are some strong hereditary components to high blood pressure, but it's a very common sign of overstress. And some people walk around for months, even years, not knowing they've got high blood pressure. Alopecia, hair loss in women, is often stress related, but it can be linked to menopause as well. So again, one sign in isolation isn't enough. Now, I used to work as a marital counsellor, and sexually things can change. And there's been some debate, is that emotional or physical? I believe that what was happening was it was emotional and then it became physical. And panic attacks, some people honestly think they're having a heart attack because they can feel the palpitations. It's very frightening, but it is actually a panic attack. So those are the most common physical signs. These are the most common behavioural changes, and I won't go through all of them, but certainly, you know, if I'm a bit stressed, I become a true chocoholic, and I can justify why I need another chocolate bar every time I stop at a garage, and then I feel depressed and sick by the time I get home. And if I'm very stressed, I just don't eat, and that's a common pattern, but some people operate it differently. When they're very stressed, food becomes a great comfort, and then we've got all the associated weight loss and gain issues that then can affect how we feel about ourselves. That just becomes another stressor. Now, if you smoke, if you drink coffee, use alcohol, tranquilizers, or any other drugs, you'll increase the amount you rely on these things. And obviously, anything in moderation has a value. The way smoking works is most people who smoke go, and they breathe out really deeply. Now, do you remember me telling you that if you tense your muscles, you shallow breathe? Well, the reverse happens. If you ever breathe deeply, your muscles relax, they haven't got a choice. And most smokers associate the cigarette with relaxation, and it's the out breath. It's the, then you get hooked on nicotine. Now, alcohol is the one that certainly in my generation have used to fool ourselves into thinking we manage stress. Because alcohol is chemically designed to reduce muscle tension. And it takes 10 to 15 minutes to kick in. So, you know, the problem with COVID as well, you know, you're not even drinking at the pub, you know, you drink at home. And the trouble with drinking at home is we don't have pub measures. They're a bit bigger. But sure enough, you think, I know it's only 5:30, but I deserve whatever you like. And you feel like you're starting to relax. And you think, well, I've had a very bad day and there's nothing else to do. I'm a bit bored. So, you know, let's have a bottle of wine with our meal. Alcohol makes a few people aggressive, but it makes most people tired. And people become really boring to live with. And they blame all the lack of energy on their work. And alcohol is a very common reason why we lack energy. I'm not going to go through all of these. You've got the others there. Hopefully they're fairly explanatory. I will just mention that some people do become more of a rat bag, and other people wonder why you're looking for a fight. And even if somebody says to you in a non-threatening way, I don't know if you've realised, you've been a little bit sharp with us recently. Sharp? Of course I'm sharp. You think you wouldn't be sharp? And the person's thinking, oh, you've just done it again. And the person is just thinking stupid comments. But some people never let themselves get aggressive when they're getting overstressed. I lived in Southeast Asia for a while. I did a lot of coaching there. And as a generalization, they were less likely to let themselves get angry. And they were very good at metaphor. And they would say things like, I feel as though somebody's laid a stone on my heart. And you'd go, oof. You know, so it can affect people very differently. And emotionally, anxiety affects people differently. For some people, it is a physical sensation. Some people become tearful, although we can cry for joy, I know that. But as a generalization, women have been socialized to be allowed to cry more than men. It's more often an option. But if you don't experience what's going on in your body and you're not allowed to cry, the way you show anxiety is you just forget to love life. People can go through the whole of the winter moaning about the weather, and they never saw the frost on the trees. They can tell you what's wrong with most people they live and work with, and they've lost sight of what's right with them. And I allowed myself to get overstressed many, many years ago. And after that, I found a mentor and I've kept having to learn how to recalibrate. And I ended up with pleurisy, infection of the lungs, because I wouldn't take any time off, and I developed a very bad cough. And more than the illness that I developed, the thing that I'm most sad about is I now realise I forgot to love life for about 9 months. And I didn't know that till I was well. My husband and I went for a walk in the autumn when I was just starting to feel a lot better. And he said, it's nice to get you back, because I was a bit more playful. I thought he was bantering with me. And I said, get me back. Why? Where have I been? And he looked straight at me and he said, truth is, you've been pretty miserable to live with for about 9 months. And when you get over the shock of being criticised, he was right. I didn't experience joy in the way that I normally do. So those are the most common signs of overstress. And what I just want to do for a moment is come out of it, and we're going to be breaking shortly. But this is why it's really important as a leader to have regular one-to-ones with your people. It really is. And, you know, Zoom is good enough. And I've had my best education by asking questions. And when I find somebody who's really good at something, I always ask them if they'll help me. There's not many people on this earth who won't help you if you ask them to. And I do a lot of work in Australia. And a few years ago, I was in one company and I could just feel the energy. It was absolutely palpable. Not often you can feel energy. And when I was on my own with the CEO, I said, you know, obviously you've got your strategy right because you're growing so fast, and I know that contributes to energy, but there's something else going on here. I've been in very successful, strategically successful companies before, but I don't feel it like this. So, you know, can you tell me, just, I try and keep things simple. If you could only choose one thing that you're doing with your people that you think's helped with this energy, what is it? And he said, well, it's more than one thing. And I said, well, I sort of know that, but would you humour me? Because I really focus on keeping things simple. And he sat there a while and he went, okay, if I can only choose one thing, I have very regular one-to-ones with the people in my team, and they're sacrosanct. And that was the word, they're sacred. Now, a lot of people don't have high quality one-to-ones. Sometimes they have them, but nobody's taught them how to be a coach, so they don't, you know, they have a chat. Don't get me wrong, having a chat's better than not having a chat, but, you know, it's not necessarily high quality. But even when I meet somebody who regularly has one-to-ones and they do know how to, you know, help people problem solve and go around Kolb's learning cycle and all that good stuff, they don't make them sacrosanct. They say, oh, I'm sorry, I know we've got a one-to-one book, but the client really needs to see me. We're going to have to change it. Is that okay? Oh, yeah, I've got to travel, you know. Can we have a short one? And the leader doesn't realise how often they actually contact the people to say, I'm just contacting you to tell you you're not important. Could you remember that? Give us 110% when I need it, but just remember you're not important. So to me, that was the word. They were absolutely sacred. And I said, when you're in your one-to-ones, what do you talk about, Adam? And when he told me I wanted to kiss him, I thought that would do it. He said, well, obviously we do have to talk about KPIs and everything, but that's not my motivation for having one-to-ones with my people. My primary motivation is to really understand how they're feeling, to find out what's keeping them awake at night, and then just see if together we can sort of brainstorm some options to move forward on the things that really worry them. And it was the brainstorm options. I don't give them loads of advice, which is all to do with how I deal with the world. And I thought that would do it. Having a leader who's interested in how you're feeling and then doesn't try to bestow the wisdom on you and just says, let's problem solve and find a way that suits your style and personality. That's really good practice. So we're going to have a 10-minute break. And then when we start again at 10:30, we'll start again at 25 to 11. I'll be sharing with you the model, the cycle of stress and distress, and explaining how and why it's a great model to help you break the repetitive cycle of stress. And I'll also be sharing a model about some skills to remember when you're talking to your team. So
10:30. 10:30. Your
25.
clock's slightly fast.
Okay.
Your clock's slightly fast.
Thank you.
Back at 10:30.
All right, 10:30. Fantastic. See you then. Bye. Bye. Before I go into the cycle of stress and distress, being as we've just talked about signs and symptoms, and I've been talking a little bit about one-to-ones, I decided to actually bring forward what I was going to do later and share with you this simple model. It's just called the knowledge matrix, and it's about understanding when there's a problem that involves more than one person, there's knowledge in potentially 4 areas. And I think it's very relevant as a model to think about how you could work with your team to help them manage stress. So in this area, let's imagine that somebody in your team, you've been seeing some changes to their behaviour. Mark was sharing with me that in the breakout room, a couple of people talk about how they kind of go quiet. Some people go quiet, etc. But you've seen enough little signs that you think, I think they're getting overstressed. And when you say to them, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Whatever language suits the way you speak, they say, I'm getting overstressed and it's making me kind of withdraw. Or somebody else, some people get a bit more aggressive. They say, well, I'm just a bit overstressed. It's making me a bit of a rat bag. And you think, oh, great, we can solve the problem because there's no denial here. Because you think that, you know, what's general knowledge is that you and others can see that they're overstressed and they know themselves that they are as well. But actually, that might not be the case really, because when they were talking about it, their perception was overstress had affected them this much. And you feel that overstress is actually affecting them this much. And at that point, you're not going to solve the problem. You have to work out what is in what's called hidden knowledge. What is not known to themselves, but it is known to others. And that might be the extent that overstress is affecting them. And this is why you actually need some coaching skills. You often have to get people to clarify, to be more specific. So I might say, so how do you think it's affecting you? Well, as I said, it's made me a bit stressed. And I'm thinking, oh, there's a difference. And I don't say, no, it's made you a lot stressed. I might just say, any other ways it's impacted on you? No, it's just made me a bit grumpy sometimes. Now, when something is hidden from somebody, the only way you can solve the problem is if that hidden knowledge becomes known to them. Otherwise, they just don't know what you're going on about. And that's why you have to use one of the coaching skills. It's called immediacy. And basically, it's just you, me talk. It means you can never use hearsay to bring hidden knowledge out, because once you use hearsay, what other people have said, you're into the thing that Colin referred to right at the beginning called the drama triangle. And basically, the shit hits the fan because they can picture you talking about them behind the back. You have to only talk to them about your experience, and there must be no put down in what you say. So it might just be something simple like, you know, I think it's affecting you more than perhaps you realise. You know, you're normally like a little ray of sunshine. You come in the office and you're like, good morning. And, you know, even when we're on Zoom, you were just always so cheery. And for the last few weeks, you just sat really quietly. You used to contribute to all the meetings, and I think you've only contributed once, and it's just not like you. Now, that would be saying it in an assertive way. If you're being aggressive, you'd say, look, what's the matter with you? You know, you normally contribute. You've only contributed once in the last 3 weeks. It's not what you say, it's the way you say it. And they might still think that you're exaggerating, but if they respect you, if you've been somebody who's always been kind of on their side, they normally start to notice themselves a little bit more. Now, sometimes you can't solve this problem because there's something that they know and you and other people don't, and it's called hoarded knowledge. And it might be why they're so stressed, for example. Now, the most common reason leaders don't get hoarded knowledge, well, there's 3 common reasons. The first one is you're not in the habit of asking how people are doing. It's just not part of your social skills. You don't say how you're doing, how you're feeling, how's your life. And so they assume that you're not interested. And you might be thinking, no, I'm respecting your privacy, but they just think you're not interested, so they never tell you how they're feeling. The second common reason people don't give hoarded knowledge is they did try and explain in the past that something was worrying them, but they didn't think you handled it very well. Either maybe they felt like you gave false reassurance. You'd say things like, oh, don't worry about that, it's going to be fine. That's chocolate fire guard stuff. If something's worrying them, there'll be a very conscious reason somewhere in their upbringing why it's worrying them. And so you have to always treat what somebody said seriously. And I'll give an example of something which used to worry me in my job, which other people probably thought was silly. but it bothered me. And so you just have to treat it seriously and use a cycle of stress and distress to brainstorm how you're going to deal with it. So sometimes it's that their past history with you has made them just think there's no point telling you. The third reason that they don't tell you what they're stressed about is because you're the reason. And they've been raised not to be upfront with authority because they're afraid the next round of redundancies, they'll be out. Or they did try to tell you, but you just got a bit defensive, and so they've just gone inside themselves, and you never know that you're the reason. And really great leaders, therefore, in one-to-ones, I don't mean every one-to-one, but now and then you say, what do you need from me that I don't do? What did I do during the pandemic that caused you more problems than you thought you should have had? And you don't fall apart if somebody's brave enough to be honest with the leader and say, actually, there are some things you're doing which are not helping. It doesn't mean you have to take on everything that's said, but you just have to really listen. And if your first instinct is it's not true, then just give yourself some time. Say, okay, I must admit that's a bit of a shock. I wasn't aware that was how I was coming across, or can I just have a think about it? And perhaps we can have a chat about it later today or tomorrow. Give yourself some thinking time. And if they have criticised you, if you want to model coping well with criticism, and you have to model this, because Nelson Mandela said, be the behaviour you wish to see in the world. So you've got to model how they should cope with criticism. Then your task is to see if you can find any truth in what was said. It's to resist the human temptation to find the bit you're not having. And sometimes the only truth is, I can understand why you took that meaning from what I said, and then apologise. I'm really sorry. It wasn't my intention. But if you just start with, that isn't what I meant, they knew they'd have to fight you. And if you can accept a truth, usually they just emotionally relax enough. You can give back exaggerations, but always try to find some truth. And so that's really what you need to be doing to help other people realise it's a problem. And once you get the problems on the table, you don't have to solve them. You do joint problem solving. You might say, I don't know myself how to solve this, but I went on a workshop. Let's see if this cycle of stress and distress helps. Let's take it to the team if you're up for that. Let's all brainstorm. It's almost like teamwork at its best if people can put the stressors on the table. But sometimes there's something going on that's really hard. And it's called unknown knowledge. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just so you know what could be in there. Sometimes there's a problem that you'll never solve because neither of you are consciously aware of what the problem is. And the problem is something called transference. And transference is a counselling term. It's when we transfer thoughts, feelings, and emotions from somebody in our past, often a parent or parent figure, and we give them to somebody in the present because there seem to be some similarities between these people, and it's safer to give it to this person. And sometimes we can transfer positively or negatively. But I was explaining this concept in a manufacturing plant I was working in, and it's more likely to happen with the boss because it reproduces the authority pattern from where it's often come. And this one wonderful woman, she says, do you know, that happened only yesterday on the line. We had a new supervisor. He walked in, and my friend looked at him and she says, I'm not going to like him. He looks just like my father. She says, she's managed not to speak to him ever since. And I thought, yeah. And, I don't suggest you say to somebody, is this transference? I mean, I just don't know. But sometimes it just helps you realise there's something beyond the knowledge of both parties about why you just can't connect. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to think about how you can be getting your staff to face the fact that there might be overstress, and what you model in terms of being open will be really crucial as well. Some leaders think, oh, you shouldn't make yourself vulnerable with your staff, and that has not been my experience. The best leaders I've seen are able to say, oh gosh, I was awake last night worrying about this. And I've had other people say, well, why would you say that? I mean, well, they'll lose their respect for you. No, they don't. They just feel safer. They think, oh, you worry as well. And if you never make yourself vulnerable, they think you don't worry about anything. So if I tell you this is worrying me, you'll probably think I'm stupid. No, whether you would or you wouldn't is irrelevant. All it takes is a perceived problem and you've got a problem. So just being honest and telling them about your signs and symptoms of stress and what worries you means they're much more likely in one-to-ones to be open with you. Occasionally, whatever you do, the beliefs have been raised are so strong, they just would never make themselves that vulnerable. But your persona will make a difference as well. Okay, so let's go back into this cycle of stress and go into this cycle of stress and distress. This is a model that I love. It's helped me understand how stress can be healthy and how quickly it becomes unhealthy, and then it becomes a cycle. And it starts in the top right-hand corner where it says threat. Now, let's think back to the days when everybody was in the office and you might be on a low floor, but let's imagine, you're working in a building which is, you're on the 8th floor. And the fire bell goes off and you think, are they testing the fire bell? Somebody opens the door and you discover that the whole of the corridor is on fire. Now that's a real threat. And the moment we realise we're threatened, if you remember, we tense our muscles, we shallow breathe, that tells the body to get ready for action. And all those physiological changes kick in. And in this situation, you needed what chemically produced. You needed to fight or run away. You might have to run down 8 flights of steps because you can't use the lifts, or maybe you can't get through the corridor and you have to pull the curtains down and abseil down the building. Now, if action is taken, if you actually fight or run away or simulate fighting or running away, if action is taken, what's chemically been produced is actually used up. And so in a short space of time, your body can just return to normal. But most threats in life don't require us to fight or run away. So you hear a rumor that, maybe the business isn't doing so well and there were going to be some layoffs and you were last in, will you be the first out? Or, you just get a snotty email from somebody which threatens your self-image when you've been raised to believe you're only okay if you keep everybody happy. We all have different beliefs we're fighting with in our head. And the same thing happens. You tense your muscles, you shallow breathe, and you're not supposed to fight or run away in this situation. You're supposed to carry on writing this boring report and speaking to people politely on the phone. And if you don't know how to break the cycle, it goes on to become unhealthy because it takes ages for what's being chemically produced to just slowly find its way out of your system if you don't fight or run away or simulate that. And the biggest problem actually is our memory. I'm not a Buddhist, but I do like many of the Buddhist teachings. And Buddha said, with our thoughts, we create our world. And I absolutely believe that. And it's memory. If you think back to an incident that upset you, it upsets you again. You think, say somebody's criticised you, you think, I shouldn't have let you speak to me like that in front of other people. And then you think, mind you, it didn't help that I said that, did it? And one bit of unhealthy conflict can set off the stress response 100 times, if we think of it 100 times. And now you're really into unhealthy conflict, unhealthy stress. Because if the stress response keeps firing, not just because of new stressors, but because of the memories back to the things that upset you in the past, that's when you end up with all those negative signs of overstress we looked at. And it becomes a cycle because you get sensitive to whatever made you feel not great. And this is how phobias develop. Now, some people get phobic about situations, flying, spiders. Many of us get phobic about another person. I actually think people are the biggest stressors around. Now, if another person has ever physically harmed you, or you believe they're capable of physically harming you, which of course in COVID has suddenly changed the whole parameters of that. But if somebody, apart from giving you an infection, would physically harm you, being afraid of them isn't a phobia. That's really logical stuff. How the hell are you going to keep yourself safe? But this is where somebody has what I call an unfortunate manner. And what I mean by that is they muddle up the difference between assertion and aggression. They think aggression is only about shouting, and they don't realize it's just about speaking to people like they're a bit of an idiot. And maybe it's somebody who's got into the habit of noticing what's wrong with people more than what's right with them. Now, if you're interacting with somebody who's let themselves get into those two habits, you will not enjoy interacting with them. And what starts to happen is you have an interaction with them where they were a bit short with you and, you know, a bit pointing out what's wrong with you. And you would have tensed your muscles, you'd have shallow breathed, it would have set the whole response off. The next time you go to interact with them, you might be even able to logically say to yourself, this doesn't have to be contentious. I'm only seeing if you'll sign this form. But in your head, you have the memory. Last time I was with you, I felt threatened. So unconsciously, as you walk up to them, or even if you click the button to let them in on Zoom, you tense your muscles. It's almost like, I'm ready for you if you start. And that muscle tension sets off the response again, which confirms for you, just having an ordinary conversation with this person isn't good for my health. You can get so phobic about somebody that the moment you see them walking down the corridor, you feel yourself going like this, and all you're going to have to do is say good morning. If that's happening for you with anybody in your working life, you've let yourself become phobic about them. And we break phobias by changing our belief system. So that's going to come back into play later. And when I work as a mediator, I often have to meet both parties offline first and teach them this to help them understand why they're not even prepared to go in the same room together. And we have to almost like break the phobia before we can even get them to have a conversation. So how do you break the cycle? Now I'm going to do it in reverse. I'm actually going to start with D because it's the easiest option to manage pressure and stress, and that's vigorous exercise. You've got to get your heart rate up. It's not just going for a walk, it's going for a power walk. Now, many people don't exercise sufficiently for the levels of stress they face in their life. But even when I'm coaching somebody who normally does, when they get under pressure, they use what I call disempowering language. They say, I can't fit it in, which translates to, I won't make it a priority. And that's when they slide. Because that, you know, jogging or swimming or whatever it is had been keeping them well. And of course, what's been happening during the whole of the pandemic is, apart from walking, at times there's been little else you can do unless you've got a bike. And that's been a real loss for people. I'm sure that's had a very big impact on people. So the question you really have to ask yourself, and you're going to discuss this in breakout rooms shortly, so please make a note of these, is I want you to tell people what exercise do you presently do? And just be honest, is it sufficient for it to keep you within your stress optimum? If it is, fabulous. It's just about making sure how you're going to keep that as a habit in your life. But if it's not, what changes are you prepared to make? And hear yourself if you're saying, I can't fit it in. Just realize you're saying, I won't make it a priority. And if you hate going to the gym, don't go to the gym. What do you like? You know, buy a bike, go dancing, you know, dance in your living room, find something that makes you happy. And it'll only work if you set yourself a SMART target. You've probably heard of SMART target: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timed. So when I'm listening to somebody, if in the breakout room, somebody says, oh, she's right, I'll try and exercise more. If I was listening to you, I'd think, no, you'll never change your life. But if instead I heard somebody say, okay, given all the commitments I've got, what's realistic? Well, I used to love badminton. Yeah, from May the 17th, I'm going to, oh no, the gyms are open, I could probably do that. Yeah, I'm going to play badminton with my friend John every Wednesday. And if it involves somebody else, I won't let them down, because I'm like that, I won't let people down. So that's good. I'll go swimming on it. I think, yeah, you might actually change your life. So that's D. So just remember, that's one of the things you're going to talk about in the breakout rooms. But the next way you can break the cycle, if you come back up the cycle actually, is before you need to fight or run away, is could you just reduce your muscle tension using anything that doesn't have a negative side effect? Now, the problem is the things that many of us use, like smoking, alcohol, yes, they reduce muscle tension, but they've got a long-term negative side effect, so they don't count to come in at C. The things that reduce muscle tension and don't have a negative side effect include things like saunas, steam rooms, well, they're still both out with COVID, aren't they? But jacuzzis, they're now on from the 12th. I was in one on a Monday. Massage, really practical thing that you could do for a partner or, you know, one of your children. My 3-year-old grandson, I gave him a massage the other day and he kept going, Grandma, this is so nice. You know, it was lovely. Yoga, Tai Chi, all those things, meditation, they all come in at sea. Now, yoga, many people think it's about postures and flexibility if you've not done yoga, but it's actually about the breathing. And they actually put the postures on because people were bored just learning how to breathe. And they teach you how to breathe from here, not the shallow breathe. And if you just do yoga for a few weeks, it won't make a difference. But if you carry on doing it and it becomes part of your life, you'll start to actually breathe generally much more deeply, which means you let the stress go more quickly. I'm sure you've got lots of other ideas. And if you have anything else you've tried, flotation tanks, anything like that, just please pop it on the chat. That would be really great. And when you're in your Zoom rooms, what I really want you to do is say, what do you do that relaxes muscle tension without side effect? There may be some other things I've not mentioned. Music is another one, for example. Is there anything you're prepared to try? And this is a chance for you almost to set yourself a little goal, you know. When it's back on the agenda, what are you going to do that would come in at C on the cycle of stress and distress? So if we could have 10 minutes in the breakout rooms, please. Chester, sorry, I had a panic, it was my second time. This is only 5 to 11. And I will see you when you've discussed what you're doing with your exercise, what you're doing with switching off muscle tension, and what you're going to do in the future.
Lovely stuff. I've got groups of mostly threes. So I'm going to open those up now. Right. C's and D's, what are you going to do? Open those up now. Just press the button if it pops up on your screen. Amanda, room 14, please. I couldn't push you into a room. If you could join room 14, that would be great. Or did I push Lynn into a room as well? Push Lynn into a room.
Decision that there was anybody who, if you were going to make any changes, tell somebody. You know, be it your partner, somebody at work, and ask them to hold you accountable to it, because you're 5 times more likely to do it if you've written it down and told somebody than if you just kind of have a little bit of a chat about it. So good luck with that. I know it's harder for people who are not in the UK because some of the, you know, the gyms and things aren't opening there, but hoping soon. Okay, so C and D are kind of soaking up everything that's got through. But I want to go back to the cycle of stress and distress and explain how A and B are actually probably in many ways the best ways to try to manage stress, because if you can come in at what I'm going to call A and B, you never tense your muscle. Stress response just doesn't happen. So you don't even have to worry about kind of getting rid of it. So if we go back into the share. B is, to come in at B, you have to have worked out what your stressors are. And what I mean by that, you have to actually make a list of what causes undesired stress for you. And you then, and you must be specific. So, for example, one of I'm talking about core beliefs. I call them drivers because they drive our behavior. So I use myself as an example. I have this be perfect driver. It doesn't mean I think I'm perfect. It means in certain situations I feel like I should be. So if I make a mistake, I get really stressed. I get a big stick and beat myself over the head with it. And the higher somebody's feeling that they have to be perfect, the bigger the stick they hit themselves with, and the more stressed and the longer it takes them to recover. Whereas if instead I could change my mental attitude when I've made a mistake. And this is one of the things my mentor used to help me with. She helped me turn down the volume on some of these unhelpful beliefs. Now I can think, okay, I have made a mistake, but you know what's good about me? I don't try and cover it up. I admit it. I apologize sincerely. I try to put it right if I can, and I do try and learn from it. You're all right, you, Lynn. I won't like the fact that I've made a mistake, but I'll recover quicker. And that's actually one of the things that you can help your staff with. You can help them sometimes change the mental attitude, because they're often their own worst enemy. They're beating themselves up. They had to have a difficult conversation with somebody, and they were raised to, they're only okay if they keep everybody happy. And this person wasn't happy with them, and they now feel like a bad person. And actually helping them realize, no, you were doing your job. You know, what's great about you is because you really care about people, you do it kindly, but sometimes people will just not be pleased with you. And you can help them get themselves into perspective. Sometimes people have to change the mental attitude before they can even come in at C. So I mentioned that I had this Be Perfect driver, but I've also got one called Hurry Up, which means I feel like I've always got to be busy. And it comes directly from my upbringing. I love my mother dearly, but she used to tell me sitting down was wasteful. So I feel guilty unless I'm always doing something. And the trouble with the Hurry Up driver is it's quite hard to come in at C. Years ago, I went on a meditation weekend, and it was my worst nightmare. You know, lying on the floor while somebody talks to you in a slow voice. It was like purgatory. So what works for one person, even at sea, might not work for somebody else, because they've got to change the mental attitude and believe it's okay to relax. It doesn't mean you're being wasteful. And now I do yoga. But I can only cope with doing Dhruv yoga, which is continuous fluid movements. And then I'm happy, but I don't like postures. So you've got to find things that work for you, because often your head will be the blocker for why certain things don't work. Now, I also want to talk about one other model that's really important at B. I don't know what it's really called, but my colleague and I call it the Mercedes model because of the shape. And it's about understanding that there's a direct correlation between three things. Now, the only thing, oh, sorry, I need to come out of the share, don't I, so you can see this. So if you've got me on speaker.
I've spotlighted you, Lynn.
Thank you. Now, the only thing we ever see of each other is each other's behaviour. It's all you'll ever see of me, and it's all I'll ever see of you. And our behaviour is made up of our words, our tone of voice, and our body language. And there's some debate about the research, but nobody debates the order. When we interact with another person face to face, the thing that has the least impact on our decision whether we'll like and respect them is their words. Too many people spend far too much time about exactly what they're going to say. It's the way you say it that's the big issue. I could run a one-to-one and I could say, how are you? I could say, how are you? I could say, how are you? It's not what I say, it's how I say it, whether you'll decide whether you'll like and respect me or not. Now, our words are normally conscious, but these two are unconscious. And I'm not saying we can't make them conscious for a very short time, but you just can't hold these two in consciousness. And in the face-to-face, they account for about 90% at least of the impact you're having on somebody else. And a lot of stress comes from not having the best relationships possible. And when I'm helping people think about managing the behaviour, they sometimes say, well, let's just pack up and go home now, Lynn, because if 90% of the impact I have on other people is unconscious, how do you ever get better at this people stuff? And I say, you've got to get your head around this model, and you have to totally believe it. Behind our behaviour sits two crucial things, our thoughts and our feelings. And if you change any one of those two, the other two instantly change. You can't change one without the other two instantly changing. And this is often where coaching or even therapy comes in. I'm often helping people with their inner dialogue, which is what they tell themselves about themselves and what they tell themselves about other people as well, and helping them see how sometimes they're making assumptions, etc., etc. But sometimes you can even quickly help somebody by just helping them change the way they feel. And I was working with somebody, it's quite a long time ago now, but he'd had 3 grievances brought against him for his behaviour. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. I'm going to tell you the kind of story. And he worked in a university, a very senior position, and he'd been told that basically, unless he changed his behaviour, he wouldn't get promoted. And the next job was the big job. And that was his catalyst for being prepared to consider changing some of his habits of a lifetime. And I was his coach. Now, as I got to know him, it became very clear he was massively overstressed. And he'd been overstressed for so long, he thought that was normal. A lot of people, they don't even know what it's like to be in their optimum anymore. And he did work very hard. He had a demanding job, and he commuted to work 1.5 hours each way on the train. And he almost always worked on his laptop. So he had 3 hours travel working on his laptop as well as a complex day. And occasionally he didn't work on his laptop because he was so tired. But then he'd sit there thinking about how miserable his life was. Whenever you think negative thoughts, you'll feel bad. And that'll flow through into your non-verbal. So when he went into his house, he'd say to his wife, "Hello, how are you?" Which made her feel really valued. He didn't even look excited to see her. So she was stacking her grudge bag about that, because feeling undervalued is one of the big stresses in life. So now he has marital problems, which means everywhere he goes is a battlefield. And my long-term task was to help him work on his thoughts about himself and other people. But we talked about sometimes you can make yourself feel better by music. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for a lot of people. And as we talked about it in some depth, he said, "You know, Lynn, I used to love music when I was a young man, and it never enters my head to listen to music. If you think this could help me, I'll make a commitment to you that when I leave, I'll go and buy myself an iPod." You can tell how long ago this was. This was in the days before you could download music on your phone. "And I will make a promise that until I see you again, I won't work on the train. I will only listen to music I love." So he went from 3 hours of worrying and getting stressed and tired. And when you're overstressed, you don't do your job as well anyway. You're more likely to make mistakes, etc. To 3 hours of music from when he was a young man. And I saw him 10 days later. He walked in the room, and I just started laughing. I said, "I think you feel a bit better." He said, "I do." The whole way he moved was different. He says, "You know, I've had 2 people say to me this week, excuse my language, 'What have you got to be so bloody happy about?'" He says, "I definitely feel happier, but what's weird is I feel younger." And that made sense. With our thoughts, we create our world. It was bringing up his memories of being a young man, not somebody with a bit of arthritis and his hair falling out. So anything that makes you feel better. I have a friend who, a wonderful piece of art can do it. I'm not into art myself so much, but he can look at a picture he likes and he just feels fabulous. So that's a very important model for managing stress. Now I'm aware of the time and I've been trying to pack a lot in, and I just want to complete the picture by going back into my slides. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Back into my slides.
And Lynn, there is one question when you've finished the slides that so far. I'll just check again, but there's a question for later.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. So that's all around changing your mental attitude and practicing the habit of gratitude. I know it can sound a bit cheesy, but there's a lot of evidence that keeping a gratitude journal actually really helps people manage stress. It was quite astonishing, the results about impact on less likely to have a heart attack and all sorts of things. And it's just because you're bringing to the forefront of your mind what's right about your day, not what's wrong with your day. But the other option is, if you've worked out what actually stresses you, then you brainstorm how on earth you could change or avoid getting into that situation. Now, I'll give you an example. My biggest stressor in my 30s was getting to the venue when I was running a workshop. And some people who knew me assumed that it was a hangover from when I'd been phobic about driving in my 20s. And it wasn't. They were making an assumption. I liked driving by my 30s. It was actually to do with this Be Perfect driver of mine. Being afraid that when I'd been commissioned to run a workshop in Birmingham, my alarm clock wouldn't go off, or there'd be fog on the motorway. And it was in the days before sat-nav. I had to find it. Isn't sat-nav wonderful? You know, and there was no mobile phones. I couldn't even call somebody to tell them I was delayed. So I used to worry about being late. Now, it's easy when you first think about something that stresses you to say, well, I can't come in at A. And I was doing that. It's called disempowering language. I can't come in at A. That's my job. I have to go where the work is. Actually, no, I don't. If that aspect of my job was going to affect my long-term mental health, I could have given up being a freelance trainer. I could have got a job as a trainer in some big organisation in the middle of Manchester and got the train every day. Unless you're in the poverty trap, and I do accept you're in a different ballgame then, and that's why I mostly support organisations when people are in the poverty trap. But if you're not in the poverty trap, your options are endless. You could downsize your house and work 3 days a week, or work in a shop around the corner where there's no stress. You normally do have options, but we just get so used to believing we have to maintain this lifestyle. And I think that's one positive thing that COVID's done. People have realised we can spend less, etc., and cope on less of an income. And so that's why you should never problem solve on your own, because I was saying I can't do anything about this, and it was actually a good friend of mine who said, so why do you look for work at your difficult distance? And I said, what do you mean by difficult distance? She said, oh, I'm guessing it's about an hour and a half. I said, oh yeah, it is. That's when I'm really stressed. And now I get it. If I would work within an hour of my home, I knew all the traffic flows. I could even go at the weekend and find it if I was worrying. If I work more than 2 hours away, nobody questions they should put me up the night before, and a nice taxi man finds me if I've gone on the train even. But an hour and a half, people think, I'm not paying for you. Stay in a hotel, just drive. And then I have all that extra stress. So get somebody else to just push you to think, could you change or avoid getting into that situation? And I think that's what coaches and mentors are pretty good at doing. So I know I need to stop now. I hope you've got something useful. The advantage of having the hurry up driver is I try and give you a lot and pack it all in, but somebody told me sometimes I'm a bit like a fire hose, so I apologise if that was the impression I gave. And I'm handing back to Colin now. Thank you.
Can I just ask the question that came up a while back, and it's a really interesting one actually. It's from Amanda Lyle, thank you. And the question is, in one-to-ones, we know how important it is to have one-to-ones. If you know that you and the other individual are super stressed, should you reschedule?
Yeah. If you think you couldn't handle it well, probably, but I think you have to give them a real big apology, explain why in detail, and schedule it at their convenience, not yours. And explain, I'm actually doing this because I'm worried that I'm not going to be myself, and that wouldn't be fair to you. And if you could make yourself that vulnerable, yeah, that'd be great. But if you just think, I'll just schedule it because I know it's a problem, then they don't know why you're doing it, and they'll probably stack the grudge bag. Yeah. Any other questions?
And there's one for me actually, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I think it was Ivan, as we both know, who helped me to sort of crack this. But I went through periods of obviously feeling as if I got too much to do, and obviously got quite stressed at work because I just felt the volume was too much. So also then having quite a short attention span, and having so much to do, I actually pond skated some of the problems and just didn't go into a sufficient depth. And what I found out that in the end, it was not finishing off what had already started that was actually causing me more problems. Yeah. And I had to learn to make sure that I focused and did an end-to-end completed something. So have you got any advice for people who feel that can be an impact on their day-to-day?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, feeling we've got too much to do, and time management is one of the stresses, and using the principles of time management are how you come in at A. But it's often that we're not setting priorities. And so it's actually working out what are your A priorities and only working on your A priorities, and not being tempted by the C that looked a bit more fun. Or if you're bored to death of your A priority, do a different A priority, give yourself a change stimulus, things like that. They can help. But actually it's your drivers that will have an impact on how you manage your time. So I've had to, with my Be Perfect experiment, with being less meticulous. Because what was scuppering my time was I was fanning around rewriting things, and I didn't add that much value. Or it's hard to delegate because you think nobody else can do it as well as you. And sometimes you're wrong, they just do it differently. And sometimes you're right, but what they did would be good enough and it would free you. So I think you're actually, I might not be asking specifically what you said, but you've touched on the whole issue of time management, but it's often our belief systems that scupper our time management. Yeah. And that's what I think you need to dig deep with, the help of somebody you really trust who can challenge you to understand what you're thinking, which is getting in the way of stopping you sorting the situation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, over to you.
Are there any other questions, Amanda?
Yes, there's one more from Erika Harrison. Do you think that the return to the office will result in people's stress being initially increased? So how can we support that change?
I think people will, my personal view is it'll be a mixture. I think many people will actually be glad to get back on some level. I think some people really have missed, people I've been talking to have missed the chat and the banter. And I was talking to a couple of clients I was coaching, and they just said, people are all in now and it's just so wonderful. But there will be some people who, of course, the commute is a big issue. They had managed, they'd found it useful. And I think that you've just got a whole piece to do about what's right for your business. So one of the businesses I'm working in, they've said everybody has to be in 3 days a week, and they give them 2 days to work from home. And that flexibility has been very well received. I just think it'll be just a real mixture. And that's why you have to have one-to-ones, because you can ask the question, how do you feel about coming back to work? For some people, it's like, yay. And for others, I'm really unhappy about it. And you've got to be careful not to set a precedent that you can't meet by agreeing to something to keep one person happy. You've got to decide as a management team what's right for our business. And if it isn't right for them, sadly, they may leave. But somebody else will come through who maybe your model works really well for them. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay. Any more questions, Amanda, or has that covered them all off?
I think that's us.
Okay. Lynn, I think that's been a fantastic session. We're just going to close out now, but I'd like to really thank you. And if I can ask people, if you can just put your cameras on for a moment and give Lynn a virtual round of applause, I think we'd all appreciate it. So thank you very much, Lynn, for what you've done here today. One of the important things that we try to encourage, obviously, within Uspire is this whole concept of executives' sort of well-being and finding the balance of life. And sometimes I think it's important to learn to say no to some of the demands of the world, but then learn to say yes more often to some of the objectives of the heart. Yeah, and I think it's you're talking about how we cope with some of the challenges that we face. I guess there's a great saying that stress is sometimes like a kidney stone. It will pass, but sometimes painfully. I have a place in Spain, and there's a wonderful Spanish proverb, which is how beautiful it is to do nothing and then to rest afterwards, which I think is always a lovely way of looking at things. But here at Uspire, we're all about helping leaders to transform their results. And we think successful leaders seek support to develop and grow. And we encourage our team at Uspire to bring the outside in to find new and exciting sort of stimulus. Yeah. Uspire Network is a powerful way of increasing that awareness and effectiveness as a leader, with a range of industry peers. So like you've had peer-to-peer discussions today, and you get a lot of quality and engagement from that. These people are fellow members, so that you can access at any time. You can connect to a far greater community. The latest research suggests that 55% of leaders already highly value peer-to-peer networking experiences, but 76% are reluctant to ask for help. The other problem is 60% of them also cannot find the opportunity or confidential environment in which to actually share those sorts of experiences. So there's something you can do here after today's session. You can do 3 things. The first one is learn something from today. I hope you don't miss, but then forget about the Uspire business concept and just carry on. Yeah. The second thing, which I think I prefer you to do, is to read some of our powerful testimonials about how we've helped people, and book a free 60-minute coaching session. So yes, that's a free 60-minute coaching session with one of the team and experience its value. And the third and final thing, which is the very least hopefully you will do, is book a 15-minute Tell Me More call and discover how Uspire delivers a 5-to-1 return for our business partners. And you can also learn about some of our upcoming future events. Okay, thank you. I think we have 2 events to outline. We have another Discovery Day on the 10th of June, as you can see, which we're scheduling in. And we also have a Paradigm Shifter conference, which is Crisis Control to Flourishing Teams, on the 21st of May. So again, we're just making you aware of that. That is actually quite a big event. It's a paid to access event, and is very suited to senior executives. We're going to have some high profile speakers actually on that event as well. Very similar to the excellent job Lynn has done for us today. Lynn, you're always amazing. So thank you very, very much. And I sincerely hope you all have enjoyed today, and look forward to seeing you again at a future event. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.